I gave them everything, my trust, my support, my love, only to be stabbed in the back. My own sister tried to steal my home. My parents justified it, and they all expected me to forgive, forget, and finance their betrayal. The worst part? They never even felt guilty. I was just a means to an end, someone they could use and discard. But they made one mistake, thinking I would stay silent. They'll regret underestimating me. I stood in the kitchen of my lakefront home, the golden hues of sunset reflecting off the water, casting long shadows across the sleek countertops. I had built this life for myself, every carefully chosen detail, every luxury, earned through years of relentless work and smart investments. My name is Keelan Carter, and at 35, I had everything I once dreamed of, a thriving real estate portfolio, financial independence, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing I owed nothing to anyone. Then my phone rang, shattering that peace. Keelan, please. My sister Sophia's voice cracked through the speaker, raw with desperation. I have nowhere else to go. I gripped the edge of the counter, closing my eyes. Sophia, the golden child. The one who had always coasted through life, expecting the world to catch her when she fell. And yet, despite everything, she was my sister. It's just temporary, she continued, her voice small. 3 months, I swear. I sighed, the weight of years of broken promises and second chances pressing down on me. I knew better. I should have said no. Instead, I whispered, okay. And just like that, I let the wolf into my home. I arrived home 3 weeks later to find that my house, my sanctuary, my pride, my escape, had become something unrecognizable. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. My sleek black SUV stood out among the luxury cars parked haphazardly in front of my house, as if it had become some kind of social club. The lights inside blazed through the windows. Music pulsed faintly, and laughter, Sophia's laughter, rang out like a blade against my nerves. I stepped inside and felt the breath leave my lungs. The minimalist decor I had meticulously chosen was buried beneath gaudy new furniture. The warm scent of cedarwood candles overpowered by the cloying, artificial vanilla of cheap air fresheners. It was like someone had erased my presence from my own home. Then, I saw her. Sophia, lounging in my living room like she owned it, sipping champagne as a group of strangers chatted around her. She gasped when she saw me. But it wasn't guilt in her eyes, it was annoyance. Keelan, you're home early, she said, setting down her glass with a casual smile, as if she hadn't just turned my life into a spectacle. The room fell silent. They all knew who I was, the real owner, but no one moved. No one apologized. I turned slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears, taking in the designer bags in the entryway, the shoes that weren't mine, the sound system that hadn't been here before. A sick realization crept up my spine. Sophia hadn't just stayed here. She had moved in. What? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Have you done? She hesitated, then with a fake, nervous giggle, she dropped the bombshell. Oh, I should probably mention, I transferred the deed to my name last week. It's legally mine now. The floor beneath me seemed to vanish. My hands went cold. My own sister had stolen my house. And the worst part? She had planned this all along. I stood in the middle of my own house, a stranger in the place I had built, and felt a kind of betrayal that no words could touch. Sophia's voice droned on, trying to explain, or justify, or excuse, or manipulate, but I wasn't listening. My mind was frozen, replaying every moment that led to this, searching for the warning signs I had missed. Hadn't she called me more often lately, sounding unusually sweet? Hadn't she asked questions about my upcoming travel schedule, about how long I'd be gone? And the mail, God, the missing mail. She had been planning this for months. Keelan, don't look at me like that, she sighed, swirling the last of her champagne as if this was just another minor inconvenience. It's not like you were using the house. You're always traveling. Always working. What's the point of having all this if you're never even here? I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. This wasn't about the house. It was about control. It was about the fact that I had succeeded in every way that she hadn't. I had no choice, she added, placing a perfectly manicured hand over her chest as if she were the victim. My apartment lease was up, and I had nowhere else to go. My laughter came sharp and bitter. No choice? She had a choice. She just chose to steal from me. And how exactly did you transfer the deed to your name? I asked, my voice cold, sharp. She hesitated, just for a second. Just long enough to confirm everything. Sophia, I pressed, stepping closer. What did you do? Her mouth twisted in a pout, but her eyes flashed with something else, defiance. You left some documents in your office, she said, voice light, dismissive, a few signatures here and there. You know how good I am at copying things. Forgery. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a crime. And she had no idea that she had just handed me the ammunition I needed to take her down. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the storm inside me. This was my house, my life, my success, and no one, not even my own sister, was going to take it from me. Sophia had made a grave mistake, thinking I would roll over like I always had, letting her walk away with what wasn't hers. Maybe the Keelan she remembered. The one who covered for her when she crashed Mom's car. Who paid her credit card bill when she maxed it out. Who bailed her out of every bad decision. Maybe that version of me would have let this slide. But I wasn't that Keelan anymore. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor, and grabbed the forged deed off the counter. I held it up between us. This, I said, my voice cool and unshaken, is a joke, and so is your little scheme. Sophia scoffed, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder like this was all some misunderstanding. A petty family dispute that would blow over. Keelan, let's be reasonable. No, I cut her off, stepping closer, watching the flicker of doubt flash in her eyes. See, you're banking on the fact that I'll be too embarrassed to take this public. That I'll keep the family peace. Like always. I set the forged papers down on the counter and leaned in just enough for my voice to drop to a deadly whisper. But I don't care about peace anymore. Sophia, I care about justice. Her smirk faltered. Did you really think I wouldn't have safeguards in place? I continued. You don't know the first thing about real estate law. But I do. And you've committed felony-level fraud. Sophia paled, her mask of arrogance cracking. I didn't stop. You stole from me, and I let that slide too many times before. But not this time. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and met her gaze with unshakable certainty. This is where it ends. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to break. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over my keyboard as the weight of the situation sank in. Sophia wasn't just reckless, she was dangerous. She had crossed a line I never thought she'd dared to cross. And now she was forcing my hand. For years, I had played the role of the responsible sister. The one who smoothed over family conflicts. Who took the high road. Who bit my tongue when Sophia threw tantrums and demanded more than she ever deserved. But this wasn't a petty argument or a forgotten loan. This was theft, deliberate, premeditated, and executed with the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences. She had stolen my house. I took a deep breath and clicked open the email from my lawyer. The subject line bold and damning. Legal action against Sophia Carter, urgent. I had already spoken to him earlier in the day, laying out everything I knew, the forged documents, the false claims of residency, the manipulation. Sophia had done her research. But she wasn't nearly as smart as she thought she was. She underestimated me. I forwarded the email to a second contact, a private investigator I had worked with before. If Sophia thought she could fabricate records and claim squatters' rights, she had no idea what was coming. My investigator had already uncovered something interesting. She hadn't been acting alone. I wasn't surprised. Sophia was many things, but she wasn't exactly the mastermind type. She relied on others to do her dirty work, manipulating them the same way she had always manipulated me. My investigator had found records of her contacting a notary, someone willing to backdate documents for a fee. She had also been talking to a shady real estate consultant, one known for taking advantage of legal loopholes. Good. The more people involved, the more pressure I could apply. I closed my laptop, a cold determination settling in my chest. Sophia had played her hand, and now it was my turn. She thought I'd crumble. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I arrived at the courthouse that morning with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. Today wasn't just about reclaiming my home, it was about reclaiming my power. Sophia had spent her entire life coasting on deception, manipulating everyone around her into believing she was untouchable. But today, she was about to face something she had never encountered before: consequences. As I stepped into the courtroom, I caught sight of her sitting at the defendant's table, her carefully curated image slipping. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. Instead, she looked smaller, subdued, her shoulders hunched as if trying to shrink from the weight of reality. For once, she wasn't in control. My lawyer presented the evidence with precision and clarity. The security footage of Sophia forging my signature, the fake utility bills, the emails she had sent bragging to her friends about how she had finally gotten what she deserved. The judge's expression darkened with each new piece of proof. Even Sophia's so-called witnesses began to squirm under cross-examination, quickly crumbling when faced with the possibility of perjury charges. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. The judge turned to Sophia, his voice firm and unforgiving. "Miss Carter, you knowingly and fraudulently attempted to seize property that did not belong to you, forging legal documents and submitting false claims. You left your sister with tens of thousands of dollars in damages and undue emotional distress. The law does not look kindly on such actions." Sophia opened her mouth, probably to launch into one of her practiced, teary-eyed excuses, but the judge cut her off with a single raised hand. "I don't want to hear it." Silence, a first for her. In that moment, vindication surged through me. For years, I had been the one picking up the pieces, cleaning up her messes, letting her win. Not this time. The final ruling was swift. Sophia lost all legal claims to the house, was ordered to pay restitution, and was left with a criminal record. As she sat there, stunned, I allowed myself a small smile. She had spent her life stealing from others. Now, she had nothing left to take. The aftermath of Sophia's downfall was both satisfying and revealing. For years, I had believed my family's loyalty to her was unshakable, that no matter how much she lied, stole, or manipulated, they would always make excuses. But now, with the truth exposed in a courtroom, they had no choice but to confront what they had enabled. And it was ugly. The first to reach out was my mother. Not with an apology, but with an excuse. "Keelan, I just don't understand why you had to take things this far." She sighed over the phone, her voice thick with exasperation. "She's your sister. Family forgives." I let out a sharp laugh, a sound so foreign coming from me that even I was surprised by it. "That's funny, Mom, because I don't remember Sophia offering forgiveness when she tried to steal my home. I don't remember her thinking about family when she racked up tens of thousands in debt under my name." There was silence on the other end, long and heavy. Then, in a much smaller voice, she said, "We just always assumed you could handle it." And there it was, the truth laid bare. Sophia had always been the fragile one, the one who needed protection. Even when she was the one causing destruction, I was the strong one, the responsible one, the one expected to endure. But this time, I hadn't endured, I had fought back. The shift in dynamics was undeniable. My father, once indifferent to my struggles, now avoided my calls out of shame. Sophia, once the golden child, was now the family's embarrassment. And me? For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations. It was strange, this newfound freedom. It felt light. It felt like something I wanted to hold onto. So when my mother sighed and said, "We should try to move past this," I smiled, genuinely, fully, without an ounce of guilt. "Oh, I already have," I said, and then, for the first time ever, I hung up on her. For the first time in my life, I felt free, no longer shackled by guilt, by obligation, or by the weight of being the family's designated problem solver. I had spent years cleaning up Sophia's messes, patching up my parents' blind spots, and swallowing my own anger just to keep the peace. But peace was never meant to be one-sided. The silence from my family should have felt like a punishment, like exile. Instead, it was a gift. Without their constant demands, I had time, real time, to focus on myself. My career flourished now that my energy wasn't drained by late-night calls and financial disasters that weren't mine to fix. I redecorated my apartment, filling it with colors and textures that made me feel at home, rather than the cold, neutral tones I had chosen to appease everyone else. Most importantly, I started saying no. No, I wouldn't be co-signing any loans. No, I wouldn't be guilt-tripped into holiday gatherings where I was only half welcome. No, I wouldn't entertain half-hearted apologies that were really just manipulations wrapped in false remorse. And with every no, I reclaimed more of myself. The world outside my family expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. Old friendships deepened when I finally had the time and emotional space to nurture them. New opportunities found me, unburdened by the weight of playing the role of the strong one. I even booked my first solo vacation, a month in Italy. Something I had dreamed of for years but never dared to indulge in because what if my family needed me? Well, they had needed me, and they had thrown me aside the moment I stopped being useful. So now, I would need myself. As I stood in my new office, reviewing a contract for the biggest deal of my career, my phone buzzed. Sophia, probably calling for help, for another chance, for a way back into my life. I stared at the screen, took a deep breath, and blocked the number. Because this was my life now, and I was done making room for people who didn't deserve a seat at my table. The absence of my family in my life should have felt like a void. But instead, it felt like a weight lifted. There was no longer the constant expectation to rescue. No more guilt-wrapped demands disguised as love. I had spent years being the reliable one, the one who could always be counted on. And for what? To be discarded the moment I set a boundary? It was laughable, really. I realized something profound in those quiet months of freedom. I had spent my entire life fighting for people who had never fought for me. The more I gave, the more they took. But now, they had no access to me, no control over me. And it was the best thing that had ever happened. Then, on an unremarkable Wednesday afternoon, I received an email that changed everything. Subject: Urgent, Family Estate. The moment I saw the sender, my parents' lawyer, I felt a flicker of curiosity. But it was overshadowed by something stronger, indifference. Whatever it wasn't my problem anymore. But still, I clicked. Keelan. Due to unforeseen financial complications, your parents are at risk of losing their home. Your sister has reached out to explore legal options and potential assistance. Given your past financial involvement, your presence is requested at a formal discussion. I nearly laughed. Unforeseen financial complications? No, this was predictable, inevitable. My family had spent years digging a hole, convinced that I would always be there to pull them out. But now, they were at the bottom, looking up, and for the first time, they realized I wasn't reaching down. I stared at the email for a long time, running my fingers along the edge of my desk. Old habits whispered that I should help, that I should be the bigger person. But I was being the bigger person, for myself. So, I closed the email. I didn't reply. And for the first time in my life, I let them clean up their own mess. I had expected desperation, maybe even an apology. What I hadn't expected was arrogance. The family meeting was set in a cold, sterile conference room at my parents' lawyer's office. I almost didn't come, but curiosity, along with the satisfaction of seeing them squirm, got the better of me. When I walked in, my parents and sister were already seated, their faces tight with tension. They didn't greet me, didn't acknowledge the months of silence. Instead, my mother sighed as if my presence alone exhausted her. "Well, finally," she muttered, "let's be civil about this." I bit back a laugh. Civil? Now they wanted civility? The lawyer cleared his throat, flipping through his notes. "Your parents' financial situation is dire. The house is at risk of foreclosure. We're here to discuss possible resolutions." A long silence filled the room. I waited, curious to see how long they would dance around the obvious. How long before they admitted what they really wanted. It was my father who caved first. "Keelan, we need your help." There it was. I tilted my head. "You mean you need my money?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." I let out a slow breath, leaning back in my chair. "Fair? You want to talk about fairness? Was it fair when you sided with my sister after she tried to steal from me? Was it fair when you let me struggle alone while she drained every resource available?" My mother stiffened. "Keelan, that's in the past." "No," I interrupted. "That's our history. And history repeats itself when people refuse to learn." My sister finally spoke, her voice dripping with frustration. "Keelan, come on. You're doing fine. It's just money to you. This is our family home. Don't be petty." I almost choked on the sheer hypocrisy. Petty? The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I was disposable when I set boundaries. But now that you need something, suddenly I'm family again?" My mother folded her arms. "Keelan, if you let the house go, you'll regret it. This is where we raised you. Don't do this out of spite." Spite. As if that was all this was. I took my time, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then, I slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" my father asked warily. I smiled, the kind of smile that meant destruction was coming. "That," I said, "is the finalized sale agreement." Confusion flickered across their faces. Then panic. "I bought the house," I continued, enjoying the way my sister's face paled. "It was easy, really. The bank was eager to unload it. Given the financial disaster you made, I figured, why let a stranger take it when I could own it myself?" The room fell silent. You wouldn't," my mother whispered. I leaned in. "I already did." My sister's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she bolted upright. "You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go?" I let out a mock sigh. "I don't know, Sarah. Maybe you could find a place the way I did, by working for it." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. My father looked defeated. Sarah was shaking with rage. Poetic justice. The people who had discarded me were now at my mercy. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't theirs to use. I had spent most of my life being the reliable one, the one who bailed them out, the one who swallowed her own needs in the name of family. But today, sitting in my newly purchased house, the very one they had expected me to save for them, something in me finally settled. It was over. No more guilt, no more obligations, no more being the afterthought. The news of my purchase had spread fast. My parents had scrambled for damage control, calling extended relatives, painting me as the villain in some warped family tragedy. But the thing about reality? It doesn't bend to narratives. Facts were facts. They lost the house because of their own choices. Sarah had sent 14 texts in the past 2 days, each one a different tactic. At first, anger. I can't believe you'd do this to us. You're a monster. Then, desperation. Please, Keelan, you don't understand what you've done. I have nowhere to go. And finally, the guilt trip I knew was coming. Mom isn't eating. Dad's blood pressure is up. This is killing them. Is that what you wanted? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then, for the first time in my life, I blocked her number. The weight lifted almost instantly. Sarah would land on her feet. She always did, whether by manipulation or luck. She would find another way to leech off someone else. But it wouldn't be me. Not anymore. A knock at the door startled me. I half expected it to be my parents, here for a final desperate plea. But when I opened it, it was Diana. Figured you'd need wine, she said, holding up a bottle, and maybe a toast. I smiled, a real one. To what? I asked, stepping aside so she could enter. She poured 2 glasses, handed me one, and raised hers in the air. To finally choosing yourself. I clinked my glass against hers and took a long sip. Finally, I was free. 1 year ago, I was standing at the edge of ruin, betrayed by the people who should have loved me the most. Today, I stand on the balcony of my own home, overlooking the ocean, the wind carrying away the last remnants of my past. The view is different now, not just the physical one, but the one inside me. I don't see loss anymore. I see victory. Sarah's downfall had been inevitable. She had burned too many bridges, taken from too many people, and expected the world to hand her another chance. But I hadn't wasted my energy waiting for karma to strike. Instead, I built something new. I took every lesson, every scar, every ounce of pain, and turned it into fuel. I launched my own investment firm 6 months ago. The same people who had once dismissed me as the responsible backup plan were now seeking my advice. And for the first time, I wasn't living for anyone else's expectations. I take a deep breath, feeling the cool salt air against my skin. I survived. I won. And the best part? This is just the beginning.